Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to another super special live episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. We are here at Transact 360 in Las Vegas. If you're following along, we're having great conversations with a bunch of different folks with different industry knowledge around, student payments and mobile credentials and all sorts of cool stuff. It's been super helpful for me to learn from all these people. But we are here today with Don. Don, if you want to introduce yourself, your title, your role on the Transact and CBORD team.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Don Smith. I'm the GM of the integrated payments business here at Transact. I'm in month 2.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
Well, congrats and welcome. And I guess so, this is kind of, I guess, sort of a, inauguration for you or sort of getting to know folks and everything. So what's been your favorite part of being at this T360 so far?
So I should also say that I was here for a little more than a decade prior, but it's been 5 years since I've been back. So it's a completely different company. And I've just been really impressed with the amount of clients and the amount of partners that are here and some of the really interesting conversations that have resulted from that combination of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to kind of what I was saying, it's such a interesting kind of intersection of different folks where there's kind of, core platforms and everything, but so much that intersects with it around mobile ordering for food, campus security and payments and different things. So in all areas that are sort of foreign to me, and it's been really exciting to be able to, again, to interact and learn from everybody in the expo hall, everybody I'm interviewing. So this is super helpful. But I think, talking about unified payment systems and student payment trends is kind of what we're focusing this conversation on. So first and foremost, I guess if you want to kind of just give a brief definition or sort of synopsis of kind of unified payment systems and what makes having them so important for higher ed institutions right now.
Yeah, so you could probably, depending on who you're speaking with, get a lot of different definitions. But I think the long and short of it is you want a system that has all payments coming through a centralized source. Certainly that removes some complexity in the system. It increases visibility for the campus. And there's some really interesting things that you could potentially do with that information moving forward, not only related to investments from the campus, where should we be investing, where shouldn't we be? But I think also there's some really interesting stuff that you could potentially do from a student perspective. How can we start to anticipate student needs? How can we get in front of some of these sort of bad outcomes? So it's a fascinating space, especially right now, because it feels like the pace of change is continuing to pick up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think, the idea that it's every facet of a campus and everything, it's not no one and nowhere is immune from just sort of whether you might define it as sort of existential crisis or something of just sort of, the sort of turbulence of this moment. But, and for me, I feel as a eternal optimist, I always look at it as sort of an opportunity, it is sort of a challenge has been sort of set upon us, to really kind of, meet this moment, think creatively, even if we have sort of limited resources, how can we still try to, right size and meet needs and, just try to be more, I think it's come up in a lot of our conversations so far today, just be more adaptable, be more flexible and everything. So what I guess
you sound like a product person, Dustin.
No, I think, I guess, I would never consider myself that, but I think respecting, how a good platform, and great tools can, I think, just really augment and elevate and supplement what leaders are doing. Yeah, I think it is an interesting moment because I think it's even the idea that if you think about, products or platforms or whatever else, we're in a different moment now. I even feel just in my 10-year career of being in higher ed where the openness to bringing in these external partners to really, expand capacity do work differently and everything. Yeah, it's just like I feel like we've hit sort of a paradigm shift or sort of like crossed the Rubicon, and just sort of
Yeah.
like, that willingness to really think differently about how an institution has done things for maybe a very long time. So,
Yeah. I think that's certainly the case with the campuses that we partner with. But I also think when you look at the vendors that are playing around that ecosystem, because of the pace of change, you've got to move at breakneck pace, and not everybody has the ability to organically drive that change. So that's where all of sort of the interoperability or the partnerships that you see in the space, the ecosystems, and how you're starting to connect different pieces for the benefit of the student or for the benefit of somebody in the administration. That's where that really comes into play. And I think that's much more a factor in our decisions than it was, 5, 10 years, like really pre-pandemic. I feel like post-pandemic is where you see that acceleration.
yeah. Well, because I know there are like a lot of changes that were made. Some institutions, like the rubber band, sort of snapped back and was like, no, we want to like go back to how we did it before, all of this. And others, it's like they saw what was possible, they sort of, and I think like it, yeah, kind of drove things forward and yeah, gave sort of a lot of permission, I guess, to sort of like do a lot of this stuff. And I think has, yeah, kind of exacerbated the necessity to do it as well. So, and I guess, even with that terminology, like unified payment systems, it makes me think kind of what you're, I think, just mentioning in your answers, the idea of choosing products, platforms, and things that are like interoperable, can integrate with the rest of your tech stack and different things. Because I think that like it may be a portion of it, but obviously a crucially important one, the idea of like making payments, because obviously like if it's app fees, if it's, tuition, if it's, everything else, like it would be a shame for a student to get like some way through a process, hit friction at that, and then they bail out. And it's like we almost like we almost had you, like we lost you at a point where it was like a crucially important moment. So I guess like if you want to expand upon the importance of having a, you know, payment system that is primed for interoperability.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, as a product person, I'm focused on outcomes. So what's the outcome we're trying to drive here collectively? We're trying to get the student to their ultimate education goal, right? And the payment, regardless of what payment you're talking about, if it's tuition or if it's something else, is a step in pursuit of that particular outcome. So I think what is really interesting as a product person is, well, where do you introduce that moment? How do you introduce it? What products and services can you introduce at key moments that aid the student or whomever is paying on behalf of the student on that journey? And I think what you're seeing now with concepts like embedded finance or open banking is a lot more companies are experimenting with introduction of financial services in pursuit of that end goal, right? And I'm sure if we were to have a conversation in 12 months, 24 months, that would look very different than it does look today. So again, it's that excitement of the pace of change, and what can we learn today, and then what new technologies come out tomorrow? How is AI going to impact all of this, et cetera, et cetera? I mean,
Yeah.
we can sort of go from there.
Yeah, that's like, I guess, being able to thread that needle is, important of like, keep the eye on the horizon, but don't sort of neglect the present moment and everything. But I guess I'll ask that question, I guess, of like, friction and everything, and I'll kind of parlay it into the next question that I want to ask of like student payment trends. I think the idea of students experiencing friction if, you know, what they're interacting with, isn't well suited for mobile or doesn't accept like Apple Pay or, whatever else, like, or they can't pay for things with like, beeping their phone and that sort of thing. Like those are things I think we've been exploring and discussing in some of the other episodes we recorded today. But curious from your perspective, like if you want to sort of drill down on any of those things, if there's something you feel like we're missing, of like student payment trends and trying to alleviate those moments of friction when they're at that sort of juncture.
Sure. I was talking with some folks earlier today, and we were really honing in on Gen Z. Obviously, that is the generation that we're primarily interacting with today, although not exclusively. First digitally native generation, very financially anxious. They've been shaped by the Great Recession, housing crisis, They've seen the generation that preceded them, millennials, crushed by debt. They've put off major life events such as marriage, having families, purchasing homes as a result of that. So they're very deliberate about how they interact with financial companies. And I think that presents opportunities for us and our campus partners to be thoughtful about what products we introduce, how we introduce it, and then sort of move forward from there. I think one of the things that we are really, really focused on is going to them where they are. Gone are the days where you just sort of say, hey, you've got 3 options and you sort of go from there, right? So you want to offer a variety of digital wallets, but you don't want to do it in a way that your checkout looks like a NASCAR, right? Like you have to be really thoughtful about the user experience. You want to give options like a payment plan, which is kind of like a buy now, pay later type of solution, although it doesn't have interest, after a certain date. But you want to introduce it in a way that it's relevant to the payer when they're going down that particular journey. And you want to explain it so they fully understand what that means for them moving forward. And there's that sort of financial literacy component to that. You also have things like some of the cross-border payments that we want to support within the experience for international students, make life easier for them. Sort of the last one that I'll kind of highlight here that's off the top of my head as we're having this conversation would be 529 plans. They're a lot more ubiquitous than they were a number of years ago. And it's pretty difficult to make a payment from a 529 plan to most schools. We were able to build a way to hold a 529 plan into your virtual wallet in our experience, linking your Essentius account with our products and services. And that's been really popular as well. So it's how do you introduce choice? How do you introduce optionality in a very intentional manner so that you can support these folks on their journey?
Yeah, that's all great stuff. And I think, trying to bring, I think just like what really resonated with me, like bringing a sense of empathy, like that can help guide
Yes.
sort of, the way that you're presenting things, explaining things. And but then just like kind of across the board, just sort of a, thoughtfulness, intentionality. Cause like I think we've all had some like checkout experiences where there's like, just this laundry list of like payment platforms and it's, kind of overwhelming and unwieldy and stuff. So like, that's just like one good call out, one good example of like, you could pay us however you want. It's like, well, hold on. Like, sort of gives a certain vibe. Yeah.
With user experience, you can give the consumer too much choice and it's paralyzing, right? I also think while there's a lot of stuff that you can pull from our everyday experience shopping, online or in person, paying tuition is a very different experience with very different emotions than buying, something from Amazon, right?
Right.
And to your point, to have empathy on that journey and to think through what that user experience design looks like is super crucial. And that feedback loop with that payer to make sure that we're, validating our hypotheses as we're going down that approach. Without that, you're not adding a ton of value. You're just throwing more at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up, I feel like we have had a very future-oriented conversation here, but I've asked everybody just sort of like, what are you watching on the horizon right now when it comes to your work? Like what should, from your perspective, higher leaders be thinking about, anticipating? So if you want to pull more on like the AI thread or something else, or just take this as you will. Yeah, like what's on the horizon right now that you're watching that you feel like other higher leaders should be anticipating?
I think there are a number of trends that we're paying attention to. Part of the value that we provide to our campus partners is we look at all the payment trends and all the emerging technology trends and then pick the stuff that's relevant to them so that they don't have to look at that as much.
Mm-hmm.
I do think top of mind for me and pretty much everybody that I've ever spoken with is AI.
Yeah.
And I think there are some really intriguing possibilities, but a lot of really meaningful elements that need to be thought through. Stuff like the biases of models, stuff like hallucinations, things like that you want to think through. And that's before we get to the lack of federal oversight, the patchwork of state oversight, and in some cases, individual campuses and then different silos within the campus, the policies that they have around AI. So that's something that will be incorporated in experimentation as we move forward. And, if we were to have a conversation again 12 months from now, it would be a very, I would actually love to go forward in time and see where we're at that point. I also think, and this is something that it feels like as we've been talking about forever, but blockchain, crypto, especially as it pertains to some of the cross-border use cases, will we see more adoption from campuses on that? I think there's a lot of stuff around anti-money laundering and know your customer that still need to be figured out. So a lot of really intriguing technologies, but at the same time, a lot of things that need to be thought through and sort of some questions answered before you really get them into broad adoption. But I do think we'll continue to see, embedded finance be everywhere. So what financial products can we introduce at the right time for students? I'd be really interested in some open banking stuff as well. I mean, how can we, if we empower the student with more insight into their financial well-being, would they make different decisions as they're going along that payment journey? I think that will be really intriguing. So, a lot of stuff. We could go on for another 4 days if you want.
Right.
I think the exciting thing is there is no shortage of experimentation that will go on over the next, coming months, quarters, years. And if you and I both wrote down on paper where we think this movie, how we think this movie will end, we'll most likely both be wrong.
Yeah.
And to me as a product person, that's exciting.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cause it this moment rewards sort of plugging in, paying attention, keeping an eye on things. I think certainly, with the AI piece, how are or aren't any of the platforms addressing the things like biases, hallucinations, whatever else. So that's just good to be aware of and proceeding accordingly, in terms of what platforms or tools you do or don't use. And yeah, and I think definitely very educational for me to learn a lot about what's happening in this sort of financial space, and student payment trends. So appreciate you being on, talking about it in the work that you do. So just appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Dave Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.